everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you guys my 2020 reading survey. This is a video that I've never actually done before, but I got this idea from several booktubers, and I will link below the original blogger that came up with this idea. Actually, on her blog post she had like 40 plus questions, but I'm only answering about 20 or so of them. So basically this is a video where I'm going to be giving random superlatives to books that I read throughout 2020, and I'm also going to give you guys some very general reading stats for the year. So without further ado, let's just get into it. So first up, I read 271 books total. That is a total of 96,155 pages. The shortest book that I read was When She Was Naughty by Tessa Dare. This is a romance novella. It was 65 pages. The longest book that I read was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, the first book in her Crescent City series. That is 803 pages. My average rating was 4.1, which is really great because that, I think, is a couple points higher than my average rating last year. I think my average rating last year was like 3.9-ish if I'm not mistaken, and this year's 4.1. So that's telling me that I'm getting better at deciphering my reading tastes and picking books that I know I'm going to enjoy. Then we have most read genre. That is definitely adult romance. Oh my goodness. In the early part of 2020, there were a couple of readathons that really just took me down a romance rabbit hole that I still have not climbed out of to this day. So first there was Smutathon back in January. I'm going to link my reading vlog for that up in the cards above. So that was just a readathon where you just read as much adult romance as possible, and that's kind of how I discovered how much I actually love the genre. And then there was also the historical romance readathon in March, I believe. I will also link that reading vlog up in the cards above. That reading vlog helped me to discover how much I adore historical romance in particular. As you can tell, I have a whole cube on my bookshelves dedicated to historical romance, so that should tell you how much I love this subgenre at this point. So yes, I read so many romances this year, which is also why I ended up doing a top 10 romances of 2020 video. I will link that up in the cards above, just because I read so many of them. Then we have number of rereads. I actually reread 12 books this year. Part of that is from my very first reread of the Harry Potter series. I also reread the Selection trilogy, the Hunger Games trilogy, and I think a couple of other random books throughout the year. But I definitely want to make rereading more of a priority. I don't know if that's going to happen in 2021 or if I'm going to have to make that a priority in 2022, just because there are so many new books that I want to get to this year that it's kind of overwhelming. But yeah, I do want to get better at rereading books that I know are all-time favorites, essentially. So let's get into all the superlatives. I have 25 prompts here. So the best book of 2020, this is going to be no surprise to any of you if you watched my top 10 books of 2020 video, but that's The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I mean, what can I say that I haven't said about this book already? I'm probably going to use this book for a few of the prompts now that I'm thinking about it. The next prompt is book you were excited about and thought you were going to love but didn't. I'm going to say Beach Read by Emily Henry. I pulled most of the books for these prompts, but some of them I just didn't feel like it, so sorry about that. But this is a book that I thought I was going to give 5 stars because it was just so hyped in the romance booktube community, but I ended up giving it 3-ish stars. I've talked about this book a lot throughout the year because I was kind of disappointed by it overall. Definitely if you watched my tier ranking of the worst books of 2020, you will recall that this book was featured in that. So the third prompt is most surprising book, and I decided to go with Things You Save in a Fire by Catherine Center. So this is actually a women's fiction novel, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I don't expect a lot out of women's fiction, mainly because I feel like these books are written for a slightly older demographic than me. I'm 28 years old, and I do feel like women's fiction in general is written for women in their 30s, 40s, and older than that. So yeah, I didn't expect a lot out of this book. I thought maybe I was gonna give it 4 stars, but I had heard pretty good things about it. But I absolutely adored this book so much. If you don't know what this is about, we have our main character, Cassie. She's a firefighter, and essentially her mother contacts her to tell her that she needs someone to come live with her. She can't really live by herself anymore, and so Cassie moves to the Boston area, gets a job at a new fire station there, and she also meets this wonderful guy, Owen, who is the rookie at this fire station, and there's just so many wonderful things going on in this book, but definitely definitely my top favorite things are the romance and the relationship between Cassie and her mother and how that develops over the course of this book, because at the beginning, they were definitely pretty estranged from one another, and then over the course of this book, they just get so much closer. Number 4 is book you pushed the most people to read. I think I'm gonna go with The Bromance Book Club by Alyssa K. Adams. Not just this first book, but the entire series, because I won't shut up about this series. I also won't shut up about Tessa Dare. Here she is over here. But I thought Bromance Book Club would definitely be the answer for this prompt, because I can't tell you how many people I've recommended this series to. Number 5 is best series you started, sequel, and series ender. And for all of those prompts, I'm gonna go with the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. This is also a series that I won't shut up about. It was featured in my top 10 books of 2020, so I'm not gonna talk about it here. But if you are interested in a darker and more twisted YA fantasy series that centers around a Fae realm where basically all of the characters are Slytherins, this is the series for you, for sure. Number 6 is best book from a genre you don't typically read. I decided to go with classics for that genre, and that had to be Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I went into this thinking that it was gonna be like all the other classics that I've ever read before, and that it was gonna be dense and kind of boring, and it was anything but that. The writing is absolutely spectacular. I cannot wait to read more from Daphne du Maurier. This is such an interesting gothic romantic thriller. Yeah, I could go on and on about this book, but I wholeheartedly recommend it if you're someone like me who doesn't really love classics, but you do enjoy thrillers. I don't think you'll be disappointed in this, especially if you don't know a ton about the story going into it. Like if you haven't watched an adaptation yet, highly recommend reading this first before watching the film. And also I recommend watching the 1940 Hitchcock adaptation, not the 2020 adaptation, because I've heard that that is very underwhelming. Next prompt I have is favorite 2020 debut. I decided to go with You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogel. This is a romance novel that was published, I want to say around like May of this past year. And man, this book just really worked for me. And I know that a lot of people have very mixed opinions on this book, and I can totally understand why. But this book is everything that I love in a romance. Number 1, it was hilarious. I laughed so much while reading this. Also, it's about a couple that they've been together for a couple of years, but now their relationship is in trouble, and so now they're trying to find their way back to one another. That is absolutely my favorite romance trope. So if you have recommendations for that, definitely leave them down in the comments below. And yeah, I was endlessly entertained. Yes, there are a lot of points in this book where the main characters are acting very immature, not only towards each other, but towards like their family and friends, but like I was just so entertained. Next is most action-packed or thrilling book, and I decided to go with Wolf by Ryan Groudon because the motorcycle race that takes place in this book is just so exciting. Like the stakes couldn't be any higher because we have our main character Yael, who is impersonating another racer in the race, so like she's terrified that she might be found out. There's just so many things that could go wrong in this book, so yes, definitely the most thrilling book that I read in 2020. Oh, I love this prompt. Next one is favorite cover of a book you read in 2020, and this did take quite a bit of brainstorming just because I read a lot of books this year that have absolutely beautiful covers, but I had to go with All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a memoir by George M. Johnson. And God, the art, like the artwork, can we talk about it? Like from like the ombre of the pink to the blue in the background, the beautiful flowers in his hair, like stunning. Absolutely a stunning cover, and I really enjoyed what's inside of the book as well. I did end up giving this memoir 4 stars, but it's basically about George's life, and it's a really great book, but I just think the cover is spectacular. Next up we have most memorable character. I have to go with Jude Duarte from The Cruel Prince. One of my favorite main characters of all time. I could go on and on about her. I have gone on and on about her in my reading blog actually that I did for the Cruel Prince series, so if you want to know all of my in-depth thoughts about her as a character and all of that, definitely check out that blog. So then next up we have most beautifully written book. I decided to go with My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This was also featured in my top 10 books of 2020. I just think her writing is everything. I believe Kate Elizabeth Russell Russell has a PhD in creative writing, so you would expect the writing to be really great. But yeah, I mean, this is a stunning novel from beginning to end. It's also a very heavy novel, but there is also a very beautiful light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely stunning. Next, we have most thought-provoking and life-changing book. I decided to go with one of the nonfiction books that I read in 2020, and I had to go with Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. So this is essentially a textbook. It's like over 600 pages, and it is the definitive history of racist ideas in America. I learned so much from this book. I learned so much more from this book than I did in a lot of my history classes in school, if I'm being quite honest with you guys. Ibram X. Kendi is a phenomenal author. I mean, the research that must have gone into this book, I can only imagine. It definitely made me think of the society that we live in, especially in the United States, but really all over the world. Cannot recommend this book enough. If you want to read this book, but you're intimidated by like the size and the density of it all, I would recommend checking out Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi and Jason Reynolds. It's basically a YA version of this book. All right, next we have book that shocked you the most. I had to go with Blood for Blood, which is the second book in the Wolf by Wolf duology. In particular, there is a character death in that second book that completely shocked me and crushed my soul, and I still haven't accepted it to this day, if I'm being honest. I mean, there's a lot of shocking things going on in this duology, but definitely that aspect of the second book, I mean, just totally snatched my wig. Next up, we have favorite non-romantic relationship, and I had to just go with all of the characters in The House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, because not only do I just love the friendship that the 6 magical children have with one another, I adore the relationship that Arthur, who is the man that runs the orphanage, has with these 6 children. I adore the relationship that Linus, the main character, forms with the children and with Arthur. There's just so much love in this book, and it's just absolutely everything. Next is best book you read solely based on a recommendation, and that has to be Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. This is a book that I hadn't planned on picking up anytime soon, but I saw Kayla from Books and Lala, I'll link her channel up in the cards above. I saw her talk about how this is like one of her top 3 favorite books of all time in one of her recent videos, I think a few months back. And I just knew that I needed to pick this up for myself, and I'm so glad that I did. It's essentially an adult fantasy, also science fiction. It definitely blurs the lines between those two genres. And we have our 2 main characters, Roger and Dodger. They are twins that were created by this alchemist, and the goal of this alchemist is to make Roger and Dodger ascend to godhood so that he can control the universe through Roger and Dodger, essentially. And it's just so well written, so well done. All right, next is most unique book. I have to go with Bunny by Mona Awad. This is a book that I'm sure a lot of you have already heard about. This is yet another recommendation actually that I got from Kayla from Books and Lala. And to be honest, I didn't know how I was gonna feel about this book going into it. I thought that maybe I was gonna like it, but I had heard that it is just a very strange and bizarre book. But just to tell you what this is about, we have our main character. I can't even remember her name, but she's in grad school. She's in a creative writing grad program, and there are these 4 women in her class with her that all call each other Bunny, and it definitely gives me vibes of like Heather's Mean Girls. But there's also some like horror elements to it, and there's cult elements to it. It's a very weird and bizarre book, but it just really worked for me. I couldn't give it less than 5 stars. Because of this book, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Mona Awad comes out with next. Next is newest fictional crush. I kind of have 2 that I want to mention. The first one is definitely Rhysand from the ACOTAR series, specifically from A Court of Mist and Fury, of course, because that's really where Feyre and Rhys's romance really happens. Yeah, I adore him so much, and I know I'm not the only one that just loves him. Also, another character that I fell in love with in the later part of the year is Bones from the Night Huntress series by Janine Frost. He reminds me a lot of Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but he's not evil like Spike kind of is, and he's just so swoony the way that he shows his love for Kat, who is the main character of the series. Like, they are everything together, but Bones is just like, so swoon worthy. For best world building, I decided to go with A Darker Shade of Magic because I really do love the world this takes place in. It takes place in a world where there's 4 different Londons. We have Red London, which which is the London that our main character Kel lives in, that is thriving and full of magic. We have Grey London, which is basically our world. There's no magic. There's White London, where the world has magic, but it's being torn apart through war, essentially. And then there's Black London, which nobody speaks of because it doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed through magical war. And I just love that world so much, but I feel like V.E. Schwab could have done so much more with it and with the story in general. So next up, we have Book That Made You Cry. I have to go with The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. So this is a women's fiction-y kind of romance novel. It's actually now a series, but I don't plan on reading the other books in this series. But we have our main character, Calla, and she basically has no relationship with her father. She's been living in Canada with her mother all of her life, basically. But then she gets a call from her father's co-worker. He's living in Alaska now, and his co-worker calls Calla to tell her that her father is dying from cancer. And so if she wants to say goodbye to him or form any kind of relationship with him, she should fly out to Alaska and see him. And so that's what she ends up doing. And this book wrecked me because of the relationship between Ren, who is Calla's father, and Calla. The development of that relationship throughout this book is stunning, in my opinion. And there were a lot of things in this book that were extremely relatable to me in my relationships with my own family members. So yeah, it was very gut-wrenching. There's also a romance in this with this guy, Jonah. I didn't love the romance because I feel like Jonah is just an asshole the whole time. Like, it's fine, but it's definitely not my favorite part of this book. But yeah, this definitely wrecked me. If you want a good romance that is an emotional time, I highly, highly recommend this. Next is Book That Put a Smile on Your Face. I mean, need I say more? I smiled so much throughout this. I laughed so much throughout this. I think part of that though is because the audiobook narrator was so good. He was able to just give such different voices to all of these characters, and that definitely made me laugh throughout this. But I mean, TJ Klune writes with a really fun sense of humor. I've now read one of his other books called The Extraordinaries, and it also has a very similar sense of humor to this book. So yeah, I mean, what can I say? Also, I do want to mention that I made an entire video back in April, I think, where I talked about books that make me smile or books that made me laugh out loud. And so I'll link that video up in the cards above. I talked about quite a few books in that video, so definitely check that out. Then we have A Book That Crushed Your Soul. I mean, need I say more? My Dark Vanessa, like I said, a lot of this book is very dark and very heavy. I cried a lot while reading this. Ooh, book that made you the most mad. I'm gonna have to go with In Bed with a Highlander by Maya Banks. If you watched my tier ranking of the worst books that I read in 2020, you will know how much I hated that book, and you will know why I hated that book. So I will just refer you to that video if you want to get my full rant. Next, we have favorite video that I made in 2020. I really love all of the tier maker videos that I made. I think I've made 4 tier maker videos at this point, and those videos take a lot of work, and I'm just really proud of how they came out. So I totally recommend watching them if you haven't. Then I have my most popular video. I just checked this out today. My most popular video is my ginormous book haul, and that has 1,746 views as of today, which I think is just absolutely insane. And then the very last prompt is video you wish got more love. I'm gonna mention 2 videos. One of them is the video I did recently where I talked about the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2020 and made predictions for which books were gonna win. And then I reacted to the books that won. And then also my tier ranking video specifically for all of the Sarah J. Maas books that I read. I put a lot of work into that video as well. And so I wish that those 2 videos got more love for sure. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this 2020 reading survey. I hope that you enjoyed. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you got to this point in the video with the balloon emoji. That picture will be right over here. I would also love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of the books that I brought up in this video. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!